Chapter 32. The Image of Christ. Whom he foreknew, he also preordained to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Romans 8:29. Here is a promise which passes all understanding. Those who follow Christ are destined to bear his image, and to be the brethren of the firstborn Son of God. Their goal is to become as Christ. Christ's followers always have his image before their eyes, and in its light all other images are screened from their sight. It penetrates into the depths of their being, fills them, and makes them more and more like their Master. The image of Jesus Christ impresses itself in daily communion on the image of the disciple. No follower of Jesus can contemplate his image in a spirit of cold detachment. That image has the power to transform our lives, and if we surrender ourselves utterly to him, we cannot help bearing his image ourselves. We become the sons of God. We stand side by side with Christ, our unseen brother, bearing like him the image of God. When the world began, God created Adam in his own image as the climax of his creation. Sorry. He wanted to have the joy of beholding in Adam the reflection of himself. And behold, it was very good. God saw himself in Adam. Here, right from the beginning, is the mysterious paradox of man. He is a creature, and yet he is destined to be like his Creator. Created man is destined to bear the image of uncreated God. Adam is as God. His destiny is to bear the mystery in gratitude and obedience toward his Maker. But the false serpent persuaded Adam that he must still do something to become like God. He must achieve that likeness by deciding and acting for himself. Through this choice, Adam rejected the grace of God, choosing his own action. He wanted instead to unravel the mystery of his being for himself, to make himself what God had already made him. That was the fall of man. Adam became as God, sicut Deus, in his own way. But now that he had made himself God, he no longer had a God. He ruled in solitude as a creator God in a God-forsaken, subjected world. But the riddle of human nature was still unsolved. With the loss of the godlike nature God had given him, man had forfeited the destiny of his being, which was to be like God. In short, man had ceased to be man. He must live without the ability to live. Herein lies the paradox of human nature and the source of all our woe. Since that day, the sons of Adam, in their pride, have striven to recover the divine image by their own efforts. The more serious and devoted their attempts to regain the lost image, and the more proud in convincing their apparent success, the greater their contradiction to God. Their misshapen form, modeled after the God they have invented for themselves, grows more and more like the image of Satan. Though they are unaware of it, the divine image which God in his grace had given to man is lost forever on this earth. But God does not neglect his lost creature. He plans to recreate his image in man, to recover his first delight in his handiwork. He is seeking in it his own image so that he may love it. But there is only one way to achieve this purpose, and that is for God, out of sheer mercy, to assume the image and form of fallen man, as man can no longer be like the image of God. God must become like the image of man. But this restoration of the divine image concerns not just a part, but the whole of human nature. It is not enough for man simply to recover right ideas about God or to obey his will in the isolated actions of his life. No, man must be refashioned as a living whole in the image of God. His whole form, body, soul, and spirit must once more bear that image on earth. Such is God's purpose and destiny for man. His good pleasure can rest only on his perfected image. An image needs a living object, and a copy can only be formed from a model. Either man models himself on the God of his own invention, or the true and living God molds the human form into his image. There must be a complete transformation, a metamorphosis. Romans 12:2, 2 Corinthians 3:18. If a man is to be restored to the image of God, how then is that transformation to be effected? Since fallen man cannot rediscover the assimilated and assimilate the form of God, the only way is for God to take the form of man and come to him. The Son of God, who dwelt in the form of God the Father, lays aside that form and comes to man in the form of a slave. Philippians 2:5. The change of form, which could not take place in man, now takes place in God. The divine image, which had existed from eternity with God, assumes the image of fallen, sinful man. God sends his Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. Romans 8:2. God sends his Son. Here lies the only remedy. It is not enough to give man a new philosophy or a better religion. A man comes to men. Every man bears an image. His body and his life become visible. A man is not a bare word, a thought, or a will. He is above all and always a man, a form, an image, a brother. And thus he does not create him around him just a new way of thought, will, and action, but he gives us the new image, the new form. Now in Jesus Christ, this is just what has happened. The image of God has entered our midst in the form of our fallen life, in the likeness of sinful flesh, in the teaching and acts of Christ, in his life and death. The image of God is revealed. In him, the divine image has been recreated on earth. The incarnation, the words and acts of Jesus, his death on the cross, are all indispensable parts of that image, but it is not the same image as Adam bore in the primal glory of paradise. Rather, it is the image of one who enters a world of sin and death, who takes upon himself all the sorrows of humanity, who meekly bears God's wrath and judgment against sinners, and obeys his will with unswerving devotion in suffering and death. The man born to poverty, the friend of publicans and sinners, the man of sorrows, rejected of men and forsaken of God. Here is God made man. Here is man in the new image of God. We know full well that the marks of the passion, the wounds of the cross, are now become the marks of grace in the body of the risen and glorified Christ. We know that the image of the crucified lives henceforth in the glory of the eternal high priest, who ever maketh intercession for us in heaven. That body in which Christ had lived in the form of a servant rose on Easter Day as a new body with heavenly form and radiance. But if we would have a share in that glory and radiance, we must first be conformed to the image of the suffering servant, who was obedient to the death of the cross. If we would bear the image of his glory, we must first bear the image of his shame. There is no other way to recover the image we lost through the fall. There'll have to be a part 2.